Hello, everyone out there. Today is as beautiful as ever, and you all are beautiful too. Everything's good, life is good. Had so much time to look inside and see my own inner beauty and find my own inner peace, my own inner strength. And I hope that you've been doing the same thing as well. Especially now, because today this is the perfect time for it. It's a time to acquire inner strength, inner peace, and just become better. So I really love what's been going on and what's been happening lately. This is an opportunity. And I hope that you see it that way as well. When this is all over, we're all going to be strong. We're all going to be bigger and better than ever before. And you should be happy about that. I am. So right now, it's a beautiful day. I decided to devote the majority of this day, as much as I can, to absorbing the sun, absorbing my surroundings, being around beautiful trees, listening to the sounds of nature, well, as much as I can with where I am. And just recently I came to a realization about all of this, what's been going on in the world. You already know the big news today. I don't need to really repeat it and power it, but you know what's going on. And the realization that I came to was about the origin of all of this. I mean, I'm not focusing on it. Really, I'm focusing more within, not on, external things too much now, because a lot of external that I see is just, the focus being on the wrong thing and being on things like fear, things that we shouldn't focus on, things that really just power a situation that you don't even want to be playing in the first place. But I think this is well worth talking about and sharing, and I won't power this much more further in the future. I'll avoid doing so unless I find a really productive topic that I can use that as a platform for. But what I learned recently, the epiphany or the realization that I had, was about the sun, the relationship of all of this with the sun. And there is a very strong relationship, and that's what I'm going to talk about here, that relationship. Now, this video is about, you see the title, it's about sunspot cycles, 11-year sunspot cycles to be specific. And about 2 years ago, I did a video about 11-day sunspot cycles, which talks about how those cycles affect human behavior over an 11-day period. And I'll leave the video in the description box below, so please check that out if you have not already. I think it'll be interesting, or it'll just give you some deeper insight about what this video is and what it means. Now, first of all, what is a sunspot? A sunspot is an area on the sun, they say about the size of Earth, that it's like a sphere of intense pressure and magnetism. And over an 11-year period, there are times when there's low amounts of this and times when there are high amounts of this and then low amounts of this. That span of time is called an 11-year cycle, 11-year sunspot cycle. And what I just mentioned to you about 11-day sunspot cycles are little mini cycles. 11-day sunspot cycles are the same thing, but they're on a very miniature scale. So why am I talking about this? What's the purpose of all of this in making such a video? Well, one reason is to learn more about the sun. I think we should understand the sun better. Like we learn so many things in school, but we don't learn about things that matter. And learning about the details, learning about how the sun works is something that really matters. And it doesn't get the attention that it deserves. And the other reason why I'm making this video is because there is a tie between the cycles of the sun, the 11-year sunspot cycles, and pandemics. And I'm going to lay that out. And throughout the video, I'm going to, show some charts and kind of, take you back through history and show you what I'm talking about here. And yeah, so how's this video going to be laid out? How am I going to do this? Well, firstly, I'm going to start off by talking about how low sunspot energy times, and right now it's 2020, we are at a low point in this 11-year cycle. And this is really the focus of the video, like the effects of a low sunspot cycle energy time. I'm going to talk about how the low energy times affect us here on Earth, how it affects the whole Earth and how it affects us. And then I'm going to explain and talk about how the high energy times affect us here on Earth. And of course, it'll be all pretty brief, but I think it'll get the idea across pretty well. And then from there, I'm going to talk about like the present situation, how it formed and how it's related to all of this, the cycling of the sun. And then from there, I'm going to talk about the direction that these cycles are going, because the cycles, they don't have the same peak. Sometimes the peaks get lower, lower, lower. Sometimes the peaks get higher, higher, higher. But I'm going to talk about how, like, where the peaks are nowadays, the past couple of decades, and how the position of those peaks relate to what's going on right now and what has been going on lately with the constant pathogen problems we've been having. If you notice, this happens like it's been every year, every other year. It's becoming more and more often. It's happening more and more often. And then from there, I'm going to finish the video off by going over a couple of very common theories and beliefs that people have about the current situation, what they think is going on. And I'll give my 2 cents about these theories and beliefs based on what I've learned and what I think I know at this point. So let's get started. Let's start off with talking about sunspot cycle maximums. What happens during a sunspot cycle maximum? During a sunspot cycle maximum, maximum is a peak. The peak, when there's peak energy coming from the sun, the energy from the sun pulses. It pulses. It pulses out energy. It doesn't constantly just give the same energy out. It pulses. And at the peak is like the maximum point of a pulse of energy coming from the sun. And what happens when there's a peak? Of course, there's more sunspots. There's a lot more sunspots during a peak. Peak is a peak amount of sunspots. And there's more sun activity, more solar flares, more coronal mass ejections, more photons, more of just various named and unnamed energies that come from the sun and get projected into outer space and also to Earth. And one of the effects that this has on the Earth is that it makes the Earth's magnetic field much more stronger. It strengthens the Earth's magnetic field. And Earth may be doing this as a protective mechanism to keep it, to protect itself from absorbing excessive energy, that it too much energy. And of course, this affects the weather. Like when there's high energy coming to the Earth, for example, it makes more clouds, and more clouds makes the Earth more cooler. And this is part of the weather. Like the sun is one of the major players in the production of weather on Earth. So now let's talk about sunspot cycle minimas. When there's a minimal amount of sunspot cycles on Earth. Well, a minimum amount of sunspots on Earth, the minimal part of the sunspot cycle. Now, when there's a minimum, sunspot cycle minimum, and right now it's 2020, we're at a minimum, and this minimum is going to go on for a year or two, maybe 3 years, something like this. During a minimum, the Earth's magnetic field is opposite of a maximum. It's weaker. It's a lot weaker when there's a minimum going on. And when the Earth's magnetic field is weaker, more radiation, more galactic cosmic radiation, like the energies from outer space, has better access to Earth through the atmosphere. And, a lot of stuff can get in easier because the Earth's magnetic field is weaker. So we're getting that type of energy in, so you get a lot more foreign type of energy in during that time. And also, what else comes in is pathogens. Pathogens from outer space can come in during this time, such as viruses, bacteria, various foreign pathogens that aren't normally here. And another way of looking at this, and another thing that happens, is that by the Earth's magnetic field being weaker, and this excessive energy and radiation coming from outer space, radiation has an effect on viruses. Radiation can make viruses mutate a lot more adaptable. It kind of superpowers viruses, radiation. So keep that in mind. And during that time, it's thought, and I'm going to show you in an article in a moment, that radiation has a profound effect on viruses. And of course, we have an atmosphere. Our atmosphere protects us from it. And, I'm going to explain to you in a moment, like, how this all ties together. And if you're an expert out there, or you're a person who knows things, I want you to share what you know. This video is by no means comprehensive. It's just some insight and thoughts. So how about we check out the article that I was just talking about. This article is really interesting, and it was very insightful for me, and I learned lots of interesting things. So let's check that article out right now. As I just mentioned in my brief description of what an 11-year sunspot cycle maxima and minima are, I talked about the minima being a time period or a window of opportunity for the Earth to receive through our atmosphere foreign energy, foreign radiation, viruses, bacteria, pathogens from space or our upper atmosphere. And another thing, and another way to look at this is that that foreign energy, that radiation, it has an effect on viruses. It gives the viruses ability to mutate, to grow stronger. It changes them in unpredictable ways. So this is the premise of what I'm about to talk about right now. And what I'm about to talk about right now is related to this article that you're looking at. Sunspot cycle minimas and pandemics. This article basically it tracks sunspot cycle minimas and looks for overlaps of time periods where there were pandemics. And it's a pretty interesting article. I learned a lot about the sun and its behavior, but what jumped out at me was the part where I was reading about them discussing that one of the most vulnerable regions as of lately, the past couple of decades, has been areas that are east of the Himalaya mountains. Like highly populated areas east of the Himalayan mountains. And they mentioned that the reason for these areas being susceptible is because those areas tend to have weak stratospheres. And I'm guessing it's because of pollution eroding the atmosphere. You know, China has a reputation in quite a few places for pollution problems. So that's what came to mind on that. And another thing I thought about was that this paper, which is, you know, quite predictive of the situation we have now, is from 2017. This is like 2 or 3 years old. So it's not someone writing down their ideas in hindsight. This paper is quite predictive of the present situation. And by the way, Wuhan is in that area. Wuhan is one of these places east of the Himalayan mountains. And here's a diagram of what the sky the atmosphere looks like. You know, I just talked about the stratosphere being eroded, but take a look at this for a moment. Yeah, I just talked about those areas east of the Himalayan mountains that are highly populated having eroded stratospheres. Here's a chart of the different labels of the layers of our atmosphere. I just talked about how sunspot cycle maximas and minimas affect us here on Earth in regards to pathogenic activity. Now I'm going to talk about a little bit about history, the history of sunspot cycle patterns. If you look here at this chart, it's by NASA. It's their prediction of our solar cycles. Well, much of it is just them keeping track of the past solar cycles, but there's also a prediction if you look at the far right. But if you look on the left, there's the Maunder Minimum. The Maunder Minimum is a period of time, it looks like about 50 years or so, where there was low sunspot activity. And this went on for a pretty long period of time. And if you look in the middle, there's the Dalton minimum. The Dalton minima, it lasted, it looks like about 20 years or so. It's another sunspot minima time. And if you look to the far right, that's NASA's prediction about how our sunspot cycle is going to play out in the future. And I'll talk a little bit about what this means later. But let's talk about the Maunder Minimum and the Dalton Minimum. If you go even further back in time, there's one called the Sporer Minimum. There's a bunch of labels and names for these minimums that we've had in the past. But during these times where we have sunspot minimas like these, according to history, these were times of quite a bit of hardships. And when I say hardships, I'm talking about agricultural problems, which of course bring economic problems, starvation, famines, war, and just all the problems that come with, people struggling, the world struggling. And I think the Maunder Minimum, I think there was they called it like a little ice age. Like there was like a lot of a long period of cold weather during this time, which affected like the famines and people having it rough during those times. So, according to history, those were times of quite a bit of hardship. And right now, in our present, if you look at the far right again, NASA's prediction, it looks like we're approaching another very low minimum. And they're saying that this minimum that we're at right now and what they predict in the near future is matching the period where we had the Dalton minimum. And we can look back and kind of prepare by looking back in history and seeing what problems they had and seeing what we need to do. But I guess a really positive thing about this situation is that we're more advanced. We have a lot more to work with. We can prepare. We're far more advanced than 200 years ago. So that's a really cool thing about all of this. As you just saw in the chart, I talked about more coming toward the present and on into the future. The sunspot cycles are getting lower and lower, weaker and weaker. Presently, that's what's going on. And NASA is predicting it to be even lower over the coming years. And they say it hasn't been this low in 200 years since the Dalton cycle that I just showed you on the chart. And if you take a look at this, what I'm showing you right now, these are the pathogenic infections that have been just popping up, year after year after year over the past couple of decades. And I kind of wonder myself if this is related to our dwindling or shrinking sunspot cycle patterns. And we're us approaching like a 200-year low. Just food for thought, just, something I'm thinking about. What do you think? So I'll end the video by talking about a few very common theories and beliefs that people have about this present situation. And I'll kind of give my thoughts on them. I'll give my 2 cents. And, it'll be based on what I've learned and what I think I know at this point. So I'll talk, I guess 3 really popular theories are that this is a man-made virus. Another is that 5G is somehow responsible for this. And another is that it's a vaccine agenda, or it's an agenda by the government or the powers that be, or something like this. So I'll just kind of go through all three of these and kind of give you my thoughts, my 2 cents on them. Okay, so is it a man-made virus? Is this a man-made virus? I think it could very well be a man-made virus. You know, I've kind of you know, I read things and I've seen like some possible motives, and I won't say what the motives that I think, but I've seen some motives for, you know, this being a man-made virus, and like why, you know, someone or some group of people would do so. But you know, it could go either way in regards to whether this is a man-made virus or not. And if it is a man-made virus, it's the perfect timing for it, because right now we're at a sunspot minimum. And if someone or some group would decide to create a man-made epidemic, then this would be a good time for it, because these are the right conditions for it to be more contagious and bloom and be a bigger problem. So, you know, I'm kind of, you know, in the middle as far as whether it's a man-made virus or not. And another common belief is that many people believe that it was created from 5G. Somehow 5G made this happen. And in the beginning, I was kind of very skeptical about that, but because I didn't really know how such a thing would create, you know, a virus. I could see, you know, weakening your immune system, and radiation is bad for you. Radiation weakens your immune system. Yeah, I kind of, you know, intuitively knew that, but you know, didn't really know the exact mechanisms of how that would work. So I was kind of skeptical about that, and also to what extent that would have on, you know, people's immune system and them just catching a virus or it actually making a virus. But what I've learned and what I've talked about in this video is that during low sunspot activity times, those are when a lot of those are times when when Earth's more susceptible to viruses. That's in history, many viruses have happened, and they were stronger during these times. And I learned that during that time, the Earth's magnetic field is weak, allowing in foreign radiation from space. And that foreign radiation can come here, and it superpowers viruses, or it makes viruses more adaptable, make them mutate more. And, you know, mutation, that means they're brand new virus again, and we don't have immunity for like a mutated virus. Mutation means it has adapted to whatever prevention methods are put up against it, or whatever roadblocks. And I decided to like learn a bit deeper on that, and actually I've heard it for over years. Like I'm following the people that I follow, and I've heard over and over about radiation strengthening viruses, and the radiation that they typically talked about was not the radiation from the sun or from the cosmos. It was radiation, man-made radiation. So when I thought about that and put that together, the 5G thing made a whole lot more sense to me. And also, the time when the virus broke, and that was when the 5G became extensively rolled out. Like last year was when that started, and at the end of last year was when the news of the virus broke. So that coincides together. And lastly, about the vaccine agenda. Is this an agenda to get the world to take vaccines for some diabolical reason, or something like this, something crazy like this? I honestly don't think that whoever is doing that, or trying to do that, or hypothetically trying to do that, I do not think that they're that organized and that smart. But what I do believe is that those groups or those leaders, those scientists or those whoever those people are, I think they are very aware of the conditions of the earth and the sun and those two relationships and in what I've just talked about now. And I'm pretty sure there's many other types of relationships that have effects on situations like this as well. But I think they're aware that right now we're at a we're at a sunspot cycle minimum. And also NASA, I showed you earlier in the video, NASA made a prediction about the sunspot cycle and peaks getting smaller, smaller, and smaller, which means we'll have weaker magnetic fields and more exposure to foreign things. So I think that group of people may know this news, and they're preparing for it by, I guess, ramping up vaccine agendas and vaccine productions. And I guess the biggest problem with all of that is, you know, considering if you even believe in vaccines in the first place, is that a lot of people don't trust the people giving the vaccines, and no one wants to be experimented on. I mean, if you do any like research, you'll know that vaccines can be dangerous if they're rushed, if they're made hastily and just presented to the people. And I'm not even going to go into the history of how that has gone wrong. There's lots of examples of how this has gone wrong on mass scales as well. So with that, I think that they're taking advantage of the situation. So I think it's partially an agenda, but also in anticipation of what's to come. And that's just NASA's prediction about those sunspot cycles getting weaker, weaker, and weaker. And they're thinking maybe they might even flatline for a while, kind of like what I showed you in the charts, which would be, you know, an even bigger problem. But all of that is hypothetical. NASA doesn't know. It's just a prediction. They've been wrong before, and they'll be wrong again. And I guess my thoughts on all of this is that some of this we have no control over, but some of this we do have control over. And I think a lot of it comes down to us living life more sustainably and, you know, not getting too far ahead of ourselves. And when I say that, I'm particularly talking about the overuse of technology and the overly just indulging in too much artificial, just creating your own artificial life instead of the natural life. I think we are very indebted, and we have a responsibility to maintain nature and be a part of nature. And I think it's part of the lessons that we're here to learn. Like, our reality is to walk hand in hand with nature. And I think we shouldn't get too far away from that. I think that's a big part of our responsibility here on Earth in our lifetimes. So I hope this video was insightful. I hope you got some good information from it. I hope that this has generated and spiked some of your thoughts, and I would love to hear what you think, believe, and how you feel, and what you know. So, you know, if you know, please feel free to share. I would love to hear what you have to say. So I'm gone again. I love y'all. I love y'all out there. Please like, share, subscribe, comment, and browse my channel. And I'll see you again in the future. Have a wonderful day, and count your blessings, because there's so many blessings going on nowadays. I think more blessings than usual. Look for them. They're here. Count them. Bye.